Welcome to the Daily Report for the 8th of October, 2024. I'm John Dickerson. Milton doesn't sound like the name of something that could be destructive, but Hurricane Milton, one day from landfall, is menacing, gaining power at a rate that alarms meteorologists who are issuing warnings of record storm surge, the ocean coming into the living room, and winds to hurl debris from the previous hurricane, Helene, that hasn't been cleaned up yet. From inside Gaza, we'll have a reporter's notebook, the story of our intrepid producer, Marwan Al-Ghul, who has lived the last year under siege. Plus, we'll have a study on where we spend our time. Americans are increasingly staying mostly within the four walls where they sleep. And we'll take a look at the first Supreme Court case of the season. And Kamala Harris continues her media blitz. The View, Colbert, and Howard Stern. And finally, you're allowed one story in a lifetime of a koala wandering through a train station. And tonight is our allotment. The Daily Report starts in a moment. Hello, thank you for joining us. We begin our report with a blunt warning to thousands of Floridians that they should evacuate before Hurricane Milton makes landfall. Tampa's mayor told residents Monday night, quote, "If you choose to stay in one of those evacuation areas, you're going to die." Milton is expected to make landfall as early as Wednesday night. President Biden has postponed his trip to Europe and Africa to stay in the States and monitor conditions.
Now, I've also surged thousands of federal personnel on the ground across the southeast already and deliver every available resource as fast as possible. And my priority is to increase the size and presence of our effort. And as we prepare for another catastrophic storm about to make landfall.
National Hurricane Center says Milton, currently a Category 5 storm, could be one of the most destructive on record for the Tampa Bay area of Florida. The city has not been directly hit by a major hurricane since 1921. The area is particularly vulnerable because of the risk of storm surge, which forecasters predict could reach up to 15 feet in some areas. That means not even the second story of your home would stay safe or dry. CBS News correspondent Nicole Valdez joins us from Fort Myers, Florida, an area south of Tampa that is also expected to be hit hard by the storm. So are the people listening, Nicole, to those orders that are coming to evacuate?
John, good evening. Most people are. In fact, here in downtown Fort Myers, they were told to get out as of yesterday. And the businesses you see here are just some of the many that have now been not only boarded up and piled with sandbags along their entries, but actually some business owners using spray foam to try to fill in as many gaps as possible to keep that storm surge out. We're talking a possibility of up to 12 feet of that here in downtown Fort Myers alone. Sadly, we all remember what storm surge can do here in Fort Myers. Hurricane Ian destroyed dozens of homes all the way south to Fort Myers Beach and Sanibel Island just over 2 years ago. It's a storm that so many remember still today, and it's really what is making so many take this storm seriously. And of course, we had Hurricane Helene just about 2 weeks ago. So thankfully, that is sort of the fuel to the fire for those who have decided to take this seriously. But of course, there are some who are choosing to stay behind. We met one woman on Sanibel Island earlier today, and here's why she says she's not leaving.
We know that we're staying, and we know that the officials know that we know they're not going to be there. We don't expect that. We don't expect them to be there on our beck and call. I'm not going to sit in a shelter. I'm not going to sit in a hotel, motel. I think that's great if people found places to go and they wanted to evacuate and friends they can stay with. But this is where we want to stay.
Now, John, curfews are in effect tonight for both Fort Myers Beach and Sanibel Island. We have curfews in effect there starting at 10 o'clock tonight. So anyone found driving around or outside after that time could potentially be arrested.
Wow, that person who's staying behind. Tell me, Nicole, what else are officials doing to prepare? They've issued the warnings, they got the curfews. What else are they doing?
Well, of course, you've got the personnel, the equipment ready. We were with the sheriff's office just yesterday who told us about the equipment and the vehicles that they have essentially prepped, fueled up, and ready to go to respond as soon as it's safe to do so. But as you just heard Bridget mention there, she recognizes that deputies are not going to be able to respond to 911 calls. The sheriff of Lee County, Carmine Marcino, told me that much yesterday, saying once they see winds exceeding 45 miles per hour, they pulled their deputies off the streets. And he said, we're not coming to rescue you until the storm passes.
Nicole Valdez in Fort Myers, Florida. Thank you so much, Nicole. In other parts of Florida, the storm is hitting areas where many are still trying to recover from Hurricane Helene. CBS News correspondent Jonathan Vigliotti is in St. Pete Beach, Florida.
And John, good evening to you. This community was in the middle of cleaning up from one hurricane when it was forced to drop everything and evacuate because of another. You're looking at the contents from people's homes stacked 2 stories high. Across this area for miles, you'll find smaller mounds like this. As Hurricane Milton barrels down, one of the biggest concerns, not just storm surge, which could reach 15 feet, but also the incredible wind capable of picking up all of this debris, turning it into deadly projectiles. The mayor here in Tampa saying this was their #1 priority to remove all of this debris, but time ran out. Resources have been stretched thin. About 3 million people in this area under a mandatory evacuation, and many of them are heeding those warnings. I-75, bumper-to-bumper traffic at sometimes as people have been evacuating. You have Tampa International Airport, which closed today. Orlando announcing it will close tomorrow. Officials say now is the time to leave if you've not chosen to evacuate yet. John?
Jonathan Vigliotti in St. Pete Beach, Florida. Thank you, Jonathan. Now to the 2024 presidential race. Vice President Kamala Harris continued to bounce around the media landscape Tuesday, one day after the release of her interview with 60 Minutes and the release of the podcast Call Her Daddy, on which she appeared. Harris sat down with Stephen Colbert, Howard Stern, and The View, where she unveiled a plan to let Medicare cover in-home health care.
It's just about helping an aging parent or person, prepare a meal, put their sweater on.
Yes.
And it's about dignity for that individual. People say, well, how are you going to pay for it? Here's the thing. Here's how we pay for it. Part of what I also intend to do is allow Medicare to continue to negotiate drug prices against these big pharmaceutical companies, which means we are going to save Medicare the money.
Former President Donald Trump's campaign postponed a virtual town hall with Robert F. Kennedy Jr. and former Democratic Congresswoman Tulsi Gabbard, citing concerns of severe weather from Hurricane Milton. Later this week, Trump is scheduled to head back on the road, making back-to-back stops in Pennsylvania, Michigan, Colorado, and Nevada. With just weeks until Election Day, the latest New York Times Siena poll shows Harris leads Trump by 3 points nationally among likely voters. First time Harris has pulled ahead of Trump in this particular poll since July, when she became the Democratic nominee. Last month, Israel killed the leader of Hezbollah, and now Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu says his military has killed the potential next leader of the militant group. Netanyahu did not offer a specific name, but in a separate statement, Israel's defense minister said they had likely killed the man in charge of Hezbollah's political affairs. Hezbollah forces fired a barrage of rockets at Israel Tuesday, while Israel sent more ground troops across the border into southern Lebanon. Earlier, a State Department spokesperson addressed where the United States stands on a possible ceasefire deal between the two sides.
We support Israel's efforts to degrade Hezbollah's capability, but yes, ultimately, we do want to see a diplomatic resolution to this conflict. We believe that is ultimately the only resolution that will provide real, lasting security to both the Israeli and Lebanese people.
CBS News foreign correspondent Chris Livesay is covering the latest from Tel Aviv. Chris?
Good evening. Hezbollah has pelted the key northern Israeli city of Haifa today. That's just south of the border with Lebanon. It was struck more than 100 times, according to the Israeli military. The Israeli military, which earlier this week expanded ground operations into southern Lebanon and says now there is a 4th division operating in southwestern Lebanon. This is in conjunction with airstrikes across the south of the country, not to mention the south of the capital, Beirut, which is the stronghold of the Iran-backed Hezbollah militant group. Meanwhile, the Israeli military has announced evacuation orders for the upper half of northern Gaza as it continues operations to defeat Hamas. Remember, Hamas is still holding more than 100 Israeli hostages, and evacuation orders like these typically are indicative of an ensuing ground offensive of some kind. This as the entire Middle East braces for Israel's retaliation to Iran's massive ballistic missile strike on Israel last week. Israel has vowed to retaliate. Its ambassador to the United Nations says it's not a question of if, but how and when. John?
Chris Livesay in Tel Aviv. Thank you, Chris. At the Supreme Court Tuesday, justices heard oral arguments in a case challenging federal regulations on ghost guns. Ghost guns, or privately made firearms, are weapons that can be made at home with kits or 3D printers. That means they lack serial numbers, which makes them untraceable. They also are not sold by federally licensed firearm manufacturers. Last year, the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms, and Explosives said law enforcement seized more than 72,000 ghost guns between 2016 and 2022. More than 1,200 of those guns were linked to homicides or attempted homicides. After that data was released, the Biden administration redefined firearms to include these homemade gun kits, subjecting them to the same regulations as traditional firearms. It also set new requirements for firearm sellers and manufacturers. The rule is now being challenged by a group of gun owners, advocates, and manufacturers. CBS News legal contributor Jessica Levinson is here to explore this issue, or the issues in this case, all of them. Jessica is also a professor at Loyola Law School in Los Angeles, which everybody who watches this show knows because we have her on a lot. So, Jessica, let's start where we always do. What are the constitutional issues at play here in this case?
So this is a great question. It's not a Second Amendment case. John, you know this is the big gun case of this particular term so far, but it's not about whether the regulations here violate the Second Amendment. The question is about executive agency power. And the question is about whether or not the ATF had the power to say ghost gun kits now fall under this 1968 federal statute, which regulates firearms. So the federal statute doesn't ban firearms. It just says you have to be a registered seller. When you're a seller, you have to perform background checks, and there have to be serial numbers on those guns. And so what this ATF rule is trying to do is to say, ghost guns, you fall within firearms. But it's not a big constitutional case. It's a case of, and you heard the justices this morning, they talked about a lot of things. They talked about assembling furniture at IKEA. They talked about making omelets, but they didn't talk about the Second Amendment. They talked about what does the statute allow the ATF to do.
So, Jessica, is the reason they're going word by word, analogy by analogy with the statute because they're trying to determine whether what the administration did fits within the language and meaning of the statute? And if so, that's okay. If not, got to go back to Congress and have them write up some new language.
That is exactly the tension. And the lower court judge in this case and the Fifth Circuit, which was the intermediate appellate court, they said, no, ATF, you don't have the power. I'm looking at the language of the statute, and I know who can solve this problem to the extent you think it's a problem, and it's Congress. It's not you, ATF. Now they're appealing up to the Supreme Court, hoping that they'll get a warmer reception there. I think they actually might if you listen to oral arguments, but exactly right. What the Biden administration is saying is just look at the plain language of the statute. Of course, it embraces the idea of being able to regulate these ghost gun kits.
So you listened to oral arguments. What were the justices trying to get at in those? And does that tell us anything about how this might go in terms of a decision?
So one of the big questions was about components and how components add up to a final product. And one of the first questions of the morning came from Justice Alito, and he said, well, this is a piece of paper and this is a pen. Is this a grocery list? And what he's trying to get at, I think, is a ghost gun are all these different parts. So can that really be considered to be a gun? And then they had this conversation, which I actually thought was phenomenal, because here's a really important issue. And the justices are just like you and me, John. They're trying to bring this down to tell me about my life and things I use in my daily life. And the question became, what about ingredients for an omelet? Is that considered an omelet? So they're trying to figure out, you get the pieces in the ghost gun kit. Can that be considered a firearm under the statute? Finally, Justice Barrett, who I think is one of the best questioners at oral argument, because she really gets to the heart of it, said, what about a HelloFresh kit? I have all the ingredients for turkey chili. Can that be regulated as turkey chili? And the Solicitor General of the United States said to Justice Amy Coney Barrett, yes, you got it. Omelets and turkey chili. That's what it came down to.
So the question is, are the sum of the parts a whole, or are they just a bunch of different parts and you can't put them to, you can't intuit a whole, even though you got everything there for it? And the reason I'm asking you that question, which you can tell me whether I've got it right or wrong, is does this have anything to do with other cases, or is this about the idiosyncrasies of the particular language of a particular statute?
So it's a little bit about how do we read statutes? Do we read statutes broadly to embrace other areas that maybe the statute, when it was written, didn't specifically address, or do we read statutes narrowly? To your question about the sum of its parts, where the Solicitor General really tried to lead the justices is she said, look, for an omelet, there's a bunch of things that you could do with eggs and ham and onions. But for a turkey chili kit, basically, that's what those ingredients are there for. Look at the specific purpose of the components to decide if we're going to regulate it the same way we would regulate the finished product.
Excellent. As always, Jessica Levinson, thank you so much. Much clearer now.
Thank you.
The country's largest water utility company falls victim to a cyber attack. Ahead, how the hack has affected customers. You're streaming the Daily Report.
These are the stories
1, 2, 3, go!
Of we, the people.
We're trying to generate our own hope.
It's a huge deal.
I'm enabling them to feel valued.
Eye on America. Weeknights on the CBS Evening News with Norah O'Donnell.
I had progressively fallen deeper into the world of online sports betting.
The risk is the rush.
What do you think is driving the spike in popularity?
I think it's legality.
If it's legal, I'm going to use it. There are ways to bet when you are 18.
We've created an epidemic of child gambling.
You can't walk into a male dormitory in a college campus without sports betting happening.
It's America's most neglected problem.
I used sports betting as a way to escape, when in reality, I'm choosing self-destruction. Whatever I had left, it was gone.
The purpose of the industry is to get you to play to extinction. And that means until all your money is gone.
Go to the ends of the earth. Reach for the stars.
Yeah, I just took off. That kind of thing.
Oh, that's pretty good. Because there's always something new under the sun on CBS Sunday morning.
America Decides is your place for fact-based, unbiased reporting.
At the White House, at the Capitol, on the campaign trail.
What do you say to those in your party?
Any cracks in the Republican Party?
Our reporters and our anchors travel the country talking to voters like you
about the issues that matter most.
Immigration is really a factor right now
that are going to be driving your decisions.
What would you say to those who say, look, that's just democracy at work?
Listening to you and bringing your voice into our coverage.
I want a strong, proud America.
Is democracy on the ballot in 2024?
Let us help you decide.
America Decides. Stream our expanded one-hour program Monday through Thursday at 5 p.m. Eastern.
Exclusively on CBS News 24/7, the streaming home of CBS News.
People with developmental disabilities were once sequestered by the hundreds of thousands in institutions.
Many of our fellow citizens are suffering tremendously because lack of attention, lack of imagination, lack of adequate manpower.
Disability activists have since torn down barriers blocking them from living at home or in the community.
We conclude that Title II of the ADA requires states to provide community-based treatment for persons with mental disabilities.
But of the 16,000 people who remain in state-operated institutions, half are in 5 states, and Illinois is one of them.
I don't want to live in the institution. It makes me feel discriminated against.
Do you think there are people living in institutions in Illinois that don't need to be living there?
Yeah, because they're proving it as soon as they get out.
The Department of Justice on Tuesday charged an Afghan national with conspiring to carry out a terror attack on Election Day. In a statement, Attorney General Merrick Garland says, quote, the Justice Department foiled the defendant's plot to acquire semi-automatic weapons and commit a violent attack in the name of ISIS. CBS News Justice Department reporter Rob Legary joins us now. So what do we know, Rob, about the suspect and these charges?
Hey, good afternoon, John, or good evening, John. Thanks for having me. So the criminal complaint was just filed in federal court in Oklahoma, and we're just reading over this 28-page criminal complaint. And what we're learning is that Tawhidi was an Afghan national who was led into the United States in 2021 on a special immigrant visa. And prosecutors allege that he and a co-conspirator, who they describe as his wife's brother, so his brother-in-law, were a subscriber to ISIS ideology and consumed ISIS propaganda. They allege that the defendant and his co-conspirator, who's not named in charging documents, sought to carry out an election day attack here in the U.S. in the name of ISIS by doing many things: purchasing weapons, selling their family home, working to repatriate their family back to other countries across the world to make sure that they weren't in the United States. And I just want to read a portion here from the criminal complaint. He further stated that he and his co-conspirator sought to obtain weapons and purchased AK-47 rifles for the purpose of conducting firearms training and committing an attack on Election Day, targeting large gatherings of people. So prosecutors arrested him yesterday, and they said following his arrest, he basically explained the plan of his attack. Prosecutors, the Justice Department said today that he made his first appearance in federal court and will likely remain in custody. John.
Rob, do we have any sense, I know it's quite early in this, but do we have any sense whether this was a lone wolf operation or whether there's any larger connection, anything in the filing that suggests anything other than these two participants?
Sure. So what we do know is that there were some communications on Telegram with other individuals named here. They are not charged, but there was some communication here. What we do know is that the defendant and his co-conspirator, who appeared to be his brother-in-law, were consuming ISIS ideology and professing their commitment to that cause.
And finally, does it seem like this was far down the lane or that they were in the preliminary sort of planning stages? I mean, on the one hand, it sounds like they were making efforts to get people out of town and do that kind of thing, which seems like they were pretty far down the operation. On the other hand, they were just getting the weapons. What do we know about where they were in terms of the timeline?
Right. Well, the FBI director came out with a statement saying that his agents were able to come and stop this attack before anybody was hurt. We're about a month out, less than a month out from Election Day. And so this is a serious threat that the FBI and the Justice Department clearly take seriously. We have statements from the FBI director and the Attorney General announcing this arrest. And we do know that federal officials and state officials have been on guard for certain threats from abroad over the last few months. The FBI director has said in recent months that he has never seen this many red lights flashing on the threat environment as he has seen in the last few months. And so this is clearly something that federal officials have been watching for. What we don't know really is, to your point, how far along in their planning were they? They clearly were seeking to obtain weapons, seeking to sell their house, but federal investigators reveal that the person they were trying to sell their house to was a confidential human source with the FBI. The person they were allegedly trying to buy their weapons from was an undercover agent. And so how far along? Well, we'll probably see in the next few weeks and months as the court proceedings carry on.
Rob Legary with all the details. Thank you very much. The Biden administration is providing nearly $3 billion in funding to replace all lead pipes in the United States. The goal is part of an EPA rule to get rid of the infrastructure within 10 years. The agency estimates more than 9 million homes in the U.S. have lead pipes. It's an issue because the heavy metal can contaminate people's drinking water. Data from the CDC shows lead poisoning is a big risk for children under 6 and can lead to a range of health problems, including damage to the brain and nervous systems. President Biden made the formal announcement Tuesday in Milwaukee, a city that has about 65,000 lead pipes. Removing them will cost an estimated $700 million.
And over the years, we've only chipped away at the problem. But chipping at the problem hasn't fully solved it. It's taken too long. It hasn't been given a high enough priority until now.
According to a 2021 JAMA Pediatrics study, Wisconsin is one of 6 states where children have more lead in their blood than the national rate. The EPA estimates this revised standard will prevent up to 900,000 infants from having low birth weight. The Biden administration is also distributing grants to help create programs to minimize lead in drinking water. The largest water utility in the United States, American Water Works, says it was the victim of a cyber attack. The New Jersey-based company says it noticed the unauthorized activity last Thursday. It took several steps to minimize harm, including shutting down some of its systems and putting a hold on billing customers. The company says it doesn't believe any of the facilities or operations were affected, but noted it would take some time to understand the full scope of the breach. American Water Works serves more than 14 million Americans. It's working with law enforcement as it investigates the hack. As the American economy stumbled out of the worst part of the pandemic, pundits and bankers predicted a recession with regularity. That it never arrived month after month did not stop their predictions. Now, Goldman Sachs says the chance of a recession is very remote. The investment bank on Monday lowered its recession odds from 20% to 15%. The decision comes after the Labor Department reported 254,000 new jobs were added to the economy last month, well surpassing expectations. The bank's chief economist says the latest jobs report, quote, resets the labor market narrative and should ease concerns of an immediate decline. Still to come, more Americans are choosing to spend time at home instead of venturing outdoors. Ahead, a professor explains why so many people are becoming homebodies. You're streaming the Daily Report.
On Face the Nation, we try to have an informed conversation about the essential issues of the day. The way to learn is to listen to the answers and to ask follow-up questions.
Why did you miss the moment?
I'm not sure why they missed the moment.
Listening to how someone explains themselves is so key to understanding their perspective. And that's why the face-to-face ones we have on Face the Nation are so important.
On America, weeknights on the CBS Evening News with Norah O'Donnell.
This case.
It's like a screenplay, something straight out of Hollywood.
But it's not fiction. It's 48 hours.
Human remains found this week.
4 families shattered.
There's no physical evidence.
The mystery would haunt investigators for years.
There's some questions that have to be asked and need to be answered.
Like a John Grisham novel.
A gripping true crime original. 48 hours. Now streaming on the free CBS News app.
Let's do it!
Let's go!
Let's do this!
I can see clearly now that the rain is gone.
Superstar approaching, superstar approaching.
Just get your popcorn and get ready.
Come on, Julia.
Oh, no.
I will if you will.
You go, gal.
Yeah, boy!
Yeah! dollar deal.
If you can't get into the market, it's okay. Renting is fine.
Box, oh, it's bad. Screw cap, oh, it's bad. It's not true.
We are making a wonderful lemony chicken.
Hot. That's good.
I wonder what Serena's doing. I wonder how Serena is feeling.
That's a really good question. No one's asked me that yet.
You're 70 years old? 70, yeah.
I'm 21.
We'll see you 7 o'clock sharp.
When you need your sports news all the time,
we've got breaking news to bring to you.
CBS Sports HQ gives you a snapshot of all the sports that matter to you.
Big news coming out of the NFL. A lot of movement in the rankings this week.
With highlights.
What a finish at the final round of play.
And in-depth analysis.
Can they three-peat? Tony Romo joins the conversation.
What can you say about this game?
When you need your sports in a snap,
we're bringing you that breaking news right here on HQ.
Find it on CBS Sports HQ. Streaming free anywhere you are.
The CBS News original 60 Minutes opens its archives.
Pretty loose for a Friday night.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's not my first show.
With moments you haven't heard before.
It's almost more fun that way when you have something to prove.
Listen to 60 Minutes, a second look, wherever you get your podcasts.
Welcome back to the Daily Report. I'm John Dickerson. Here are some additions to our top stories. Supreme Court justices seemed skeptical Tuesday of a challenge to the Biden administration's efforts to regulate ghost guns. Case brought on by gun owners, manufacturers, and gun rights groups revolves around a regulation subjecting ghost guns to the same requirements as commercial firearms. 13 states and the District of Columbia are suing TikTok, accusing it of harming young people and failing to protect them. The separate lawsuits allege TikTok uses intentionally addictive software to keep children watching in order to target them with ads. TikTok has denied the allegations. President Biden is postponing foreign travel to monitor the response to Hurricane Milton. Biden was set to visit Germany and Angola this week. Instead, he will remain in Washington. The Angola visit would have fulfilled his promise to visit Africa as president. You may think Americans being homebodies started during the pandemic, but a new study finds that the amount of time people spend at home was steadily rising long before the 2020 lockdowns. Patrick Sharkey, a professor of sociology and public affairs at Princeton University, examined U.S. Census data and the American Time Use Survey from 2003 to 2022. He found that during those 19 years, the average amount of time Americans spent at home increased by 10% per day, meaning roughly 1 hour and 40 minutes. As you can see, the pandemic did cause an all-time high in 2020 before declining in 21 and 22. However, when looking at 2003 through 19, the average time spent at home rose by roughly 30 minutes. Professor Sharkey joins us now to discuss his findings. Thank you so much for being with us. So let's start with where the biggest increase happened, which was among people aged 15 to 34. Why?
Yeah, so this was a trend that really was experienced by all segments of the population, but the group that had the greatest growth in time spent at home was younger Americans, so 15 to 24, 25 to 34-year-olds. And this is a group that typically spends the least amount of time at home. So these were profound changes in just the structure of daily life that were particularly pronounced for this segment of the population.
And do we know what they're doing? Well, tell me two things. One, what is this segment of the population doing that's keeping them at home? And then did your findings suggest anything different about the way we're living our lives if we're spending more of our lives at home?
Yeah, so on the first question, the very visible changes during the pandemic were changes in remote work, schooling at home. But what I found was that really every type of activity is now much more likely to happen at home. So this includes socializing, we eat more frequently at home, we take part in religious and spiritual activities more frequently at home. So it's really a widespread set of changes that have shifted to the home environment in a way that I don't think was clear prior to the pandemic, but became very visible when we were all stuck at home in the lockdowns, it starting in March 2020.
And so what are some of the causes for that? If it was happening and we weren't seeing it until we were all forced to stay home, what are some of the contributing factors that have moved all these different facets of life into the four walls of our homes?
Yeah, so it's a great question, and the obvious answers are technology, right? There's a whole set of technologies from our phones to our laptops, and before that, the internet and personal computers that make it more possible for us to remain home and take part in all of these types of activities. But I do think there's another dimension here. We live in a country that provides very heavy subsidies to encourage Americans to buy the most expensive homes they can find in the most exclusive neighborhoods, and then to do whatever they can to kind of protect from development happening and exclude others from joining their communities. At the same time, we don't have that same commitment to what the sociologist Eric Kleinenberg calls social infrastructure, the institutions that bring us together, things like parks and libraries and public transit systems. So we find ourselves in a position where it's often much more comfortable to be at home. We don't have to deal with traffic. We don't have to deal with the public transit systems that aren't working all that well. And these are all part of the equation, I think, for why there's been this long-term shift toward life at home.
Oh, that's fascinating. All right, so final question then is, remind me of the distinction and what these data tell you about the difference between being alone and loneliness, which the Surgeon General has told us is a kind of epidemic in America.
Yeah, so this is purely about spending your time at home. That said, the data set does give an indication of what this means for who we spend our time with, how we perceive that time, whether we find our time meaningful or not. And one of the core findings from the analysis, and I want to be clear, this is not purely a positive or a negative trait. A lot of people really enjoy living in the comfort of home. You can see me, I'm at my home office now having this interview. But there is some evidence in the article showing that when the same person takes part in activity at home versus away from home, they find the activity less meaningful. When there's not social interaction, when we're not outside the home with friends, outside of our home office in this case, in my case, it means that I may not be interacting with students. I may not see a colleague that I meant to talk to. I think even those of us who recognize the value and the comfort and appreciate how pleasant it is to be home can recognize also that we miss something when we're at home and we're not out as much in public space. And there are tangible consequences for the perceived meaning of activities, how meaningful these activities are, and how happy respondents report being as they take part in different activities at home versus outside the home.
Professor Patrick Sharkey, fascinating work. Thank you so much.
Thanks, John.
Florida's Gulf Coast sees a lot of hurricanes, but the strength of recent storms in the region has been significantly stronger than in years past. Hurricane Milton had maximum sustained wind speeds of 165 miles an hour Tuesday evening as it continued to make its way towards the Tampa area. At least 10 counties have been ordered to evacuate, with meteorologists and politicians alike referring to it as a potentially catastrophic storm. In a social media post Monday, Florida Senator Marco Rubio said he asked the National Hurricane Center years ago what the worst storm that could hit the state would look like. He said they showed him a hurricane that looks just like Milton's forecast. CBS News chief meteorologist and hurricane specialist Ivan Cabrera joins us now from Miami. Ivan, what is making Hurricane Milton so much worse than all the other hurricanes that have swept through Florida's Gulf Coast?
Yeah, John, good to see you here. So the same reason we've had all these intensifications of late for the most part here, and it is high octane fuel in the form of sea surface temperatures that are really just caused by human-induced climate change. The oceans are warming, and that is the key to make strong hurricanes here. So as we take a look at, Milton, it has exploded into a Category 5. It did that yesterday, has gone through some fluctuations. But I'm showing you behind here, and I'll take out the satellite from Milton so you can see all the red spots you see there are well above average sea surface temperatures. The more moisture, or the higher the temperatures at the surface of the sea here, the more fuel the storm has. So you see these little pockets here of red that continue to really fuel the storm. Check this out. This is the historical line here. And notice this little lobe here of really warm temperatures across the southern part of the track of the storm. It went from a Category 5, no coincidence that it moved through that area and then blew up into a Category 5. If these water temperatures were at least normal or below normal, we would not have had this explosive Category 5 storm. The evidence is right there for you. And then what I'm concerned about, John, is over the next few days, this Cat 5 is going to move over. Now, this isn't climate change here. This is just an area that is typically there. We call the loop current. That's deep, warm water. And as it passes through that could intensify the storm even more so over the next coming days, or at least maintain its status as a Cat 4 or 5.
So lingering for a moment on the warmer water, does that mean both a chance for increased frequency of hurricanes or increased power of the hurricanes, or both?
Yeah, so we'll get the frequency is going to be there, and that's going to depend on the global circulations and other factors that go into a hurricane season forecast. But the storms that do form are the ones that are capable to really reach Category 4 or 5. We had a Category 5 storm in the Atlantic late June and into early July, something we've never seen before. That's the early time that has happened, and that's a clear indication of these water temperatures that have been out of control. Each storm is different. Some are bigger, some are more compact, but the intensity is directly related to those very warm sea surface temperatures.
And remind us why the Gulf Coast is more vulnerable, or is it more vulnerable to hurricanes than other parts of the seacoast in the States?
Yeah, there are particular areas here. Great question. Particularly the Tampa Bay area. Here's the wind field as it continues to expand. If the hurricane force winds, particularly the landfall, is to the north of Tampa Bay, that area is just prone to significant flooding. And let me show you why as we zoom in here to the area. I used to live in Tampa, and I tell you, the water has nowhere to go. If you get a storm surge that comes into Tampa Bay, look at this water. It's going to go up Hillsborough Bay, nowhere to go there. That's downtown Tampa. It's going to go through the Hillsborough River, through towns, through cities there, and then Old Tampa Bay. That's another area. So you're going to get this water that just continues to pile up into this area. Davis Island's right there, and you can see just the coastline here. It is just prone to the worst storm surge, really potential across not just Florida, but the rest of the Gulf Coast states. And that's why we're concerned about this making the wrong landfall, meaning it to the north, and then having that storm surge come in over the next few days.
Watching closely, Ivan Cabrera, thank you so much for that insight. Israel formally declared war on Hamas 1 year ago. Coming up, we'll hear the stories of our producer who has spent the last 365 days inside war-torn Gaza. You're streaming the Daily Report.
Washington is the seat of power. National security, foreign policy, global economics, every story comes through Washington in some way. We bring some of the most powerful voices in America to the table. We don't just ask the questions, you have to go deeper. We try to understand what's at the heart of the issue we're talking about, to then come forward with solutions.
Face the Nation on CBS.
The justices ruled that Harvard and the University of North Carolina violated the Constitution.
In the aftermath of the Supreme Court decision to end affirmative action in college admissions, uncertainty sets in for some students of color.
Affirmative action really gave us an equal opportunity.
CBS Reports explores the historic decision and what it means for those chasing an opportunity to change their lives.
I knew that college was the ticket to break this cycle.
The end of affirmative action, now streaming on the free CBS News app.
America Decides is your place for fact-based, unbiased reporting.
At the White House, at the Capitol, on the campaign trail. What do you say to those in your party?
Any cracks in the Republican Party? Our reporters and our anchors travel the country talking to voters like you
about the issues that matter most.
Immigration is really a factor right now
that are going to be driving your decisions.
What would you say to those who say, look, that's just democracy at work?
Listening to you and bringing your voice into our coverage.
I want a strong, proud America.
Is democracy on the ballot in 2024?
Let us help you decide.
America Decides on CBS News 24/7.
Stream our expanded one-hour program Monday through Thursday at 5 p.m. Eastern.
An original documentary from CBS Reports.
AI is among the most world-changing technologies ever.
Curing diseases, scientific breakthroughs, making lives better.
They can help us with medical discoveries, scientific discoveries, doing better agriculture, having cures for things like Alzheimer's.
It's also going to really transform the way we work.
The uplifting potential of artificial intelligence is limitless.
It gives you a friend, somebody to chat with 24/7.
that is non-judgmental. He makes me feel loved and desired.
And so are its downfalls.
The problem with all this AI is that it's unpredictable and uncontrollable.
The choices we make now will have lasting effects for decades, maybe even centuries.
The ChatGPT revolution, now streaming on the free CBS News app.
We are about to see American weapons in the hands of Mexican cartels.
A gun pipeline to Mexico.
We are arming the cartels.
100%, no doubt about it.
Happening right under our noses.
Who's doing something about this? Nobody.
A CBS Reports exclusive.
Most Americans have no idea that we are effectively arming the enemy next door.
This is the story the American people need to know.
Arming cartels, now streaming on the free CBS News app.
1 year ago, Israel declared war on Hamas in retaliation for the October 7th attack. In the 365 days since, Gaza's health ministry estimates more than 41,000 Palestinians have been killed, many of them women and children. Access inside Gaza is extremely limited. At CBS News, we rely on journalists like Marwan Al-Ghul to show the world what is happening there. Apart from videos of the October 7th massacre, everything you're about to see was filmed by Marwan and his team. And a warning, some viewers might find the following images disturbing.
I am Marwan Al-Ghul, was born in Gaza. I am 61 years old. I am married and have a beautiful family. Before the 7th of October, Gaza had been going through years of relative calm. The weather that night was pleasant and the sea was calm too. I woke up on sounds of a frequently barrage of rockets were launching from Gaza toward Israel. The sky was lined up by hundreds of rocket signs. Then I went down to the street to realize what was happening. I saw dozens of Hamas militants riding four-wheel drive vehicles, driving very fast, heading the border with Israel. I saw militants heading towards the border and others capturing hostages into Gaza. The next day, Gaza was under bombing. Then I began working very hard on covering this war.
All of the facts on the grounds show that Israel is going to invade Gaza. I am afraid of what's going on now. I am worried about my family, about my granddaughters.
In the second week of the war, Israeli war planes began bombing around the hotel.
Oh no.
And destroying the buildings nearby. It was terrifying. October 14, bombing and airstrikes intensified. We could not sleep that night. I looked into my wife's eyes and we fully realized that we had to say goodbye. I have covered many rounds of violence and battles in Gaza, but I have never ever seen such an ugly war as the current one. The deadly airstrikes cause massive destructions and kills thousands of civilians. Mostly are children and women.
No civil defense, no enough ambulances, just the people around by their bare hands carrying the bodies, try to take the injuries out of this massive destruction in Rafah.
Certainly, many painful stories left me with very deep sadness. But the most horrific one was when I headed to the Nusayrat camp to cover one of these deadly attacks on a crowded house.
Everything is gone. I can't tell now. This is woman body. At least 50 were killed in this place. Mostly are children and women. Among of the dozens who were killed in this bloody airstrike were my nephew, Mahmoud, and his family. I kept myself strong as much as I could and started searching with others to identify Mahmoud or anyone of his family. Then I heard that his daughter, Maria, is alive and was taken to Al-Aqsa Hospital in Deir al-Balah city. She is the only alive one of her family. She lost her parents, her 2 brothers and 2 sisters. Maria has heartbroken and still living in the trauma. I am Marwan Al-Ghul from Gaza. I've been working years with CBS News as a producer. I'm speaking to you from the city of Deir al-Balah in the middle of the Gaza Strip. After being displaced multiple times from north to south. It's not easy to keep reporting the ongoing war. Every day I see heartbreaking victims. Children are bleeding on the ground. Tears of grieving women. I have family, children. I am worried about them too, as there is no safe place in Gaza. No one is safe at all. I am afraid that my family, needs years to get recovered in this cruel circumstances. Thank you all for listening to me and get my voice out of Gaza.
That was Marwan Al-Ghul reporting from Gaza. We'll be right back.
Go to the ends of the earth.
Right now.
We got something crazy.
And reach for the stars.
Here we are.
Time.
Yes, it's my comeback.
Hey, this is pretty fun.
But wait, there's more.
Experience thought-provoking,
I'm open to the idea of being a human being.
innovative, and truly original reporting.
Look through a telescope and go, wow.
Because there's always something new under the sun on CBS Sunday morning.
At this moment, terrorists could be plotting another attack.
9/11 triggered a counter-terrorist system that included a secret database.
This person needs a closer look.
A growing list of nearly 2 million people, including some Americans who say they're innocent.
For 1 hour flight, I have to spend 6 hours to go and come back.
CBS Reports explores the system, the people responsible for it, and those pushing for change.
I'm not fighting against them. I'm fighting for them to do the right thing.
The Watch List, now streaming on the free CBS News app.
Don't miss true crime anytime you want, anywhere you go. With the 48 Hours podcast. Real crimes, real lives, real justice.
There's some questions that have to be asked and need to be answered.
Listen to 48 Hours on Apple Podcasts.
An original documentary from CBS Reports.
Imagine yourself in Manhattan with no police, no army, no mayor.
The people of Haiti stare down poverty, corruption, natural disasters, and violence.
90% of the guns that are used by gangs in Haiti are American guns.
But with an unbreakable spirit and eternal optimism.
There are days where I cry, but we can't be discouraged. We still believe in Haiti.
They're still able to look ahead with hope.
Haiti is on the brink of transformation, a radical shift. Haitians are coming together and saying things must change.
Fighting for Haiti, now streaming on the free CBS News app.
Hey there, welcome to The Uplift.
I thought she was a groom, and I stepped back and I went, oh, you're the queen. She's going to be with me every instant that I'm alive.
I just wanted to see if you'd go to Disneyland with me today.
I look over at him and he's smiling.
I'm going to remember that the rest of my life.
They told us when he was going to be born, he was only going to live for 30 minutes. It's really a miracle that he's with us today.
The Uplift. Stream now on the free CBS News app.
When you wake up in the morning, we want to be your go-to team.
On our places, bright, shiny faces.
I don't go to work in the morning. I go for coffee with my two good friends, and we talk about the world.
Your morning routine just got better. CBS Mornings.
A CBS News investigation. People looking for love, finding their life savings gone.
This could happen to anybody.
And sometimes losing their lives. Anything for love. Now streaming on the free CBS News app.
The man known as the godfather of artificial intelligence is one of two scientists who were awarded the Nobel Prize in Physics for their work surrounding the technology. American John Hopfield and Geoffrey Hinton, a dual Canadian and British citizen, are pioneers in the field who helped create the foundation of AI. Their work on machine learning helps develop how a computer can train itself to generate information. It's behind a range of tech used for everyday activities, from searching the web to editing images on your phone. Neither man was home to receive the call they'd won the prize, though. Hopfield was out grabbing coffee and getting a flu shot. And for all his contributions to tech, Hinton was at a hotel that had no internet. If only there had been some automated system, say a kind of intelligence, that could have helped alert them to the urgent news. Someone should get on that. A koala walks into a train station and says, "I can't bear it because I'm a marsupial." That is a bad joke, but it's actually also an actual occurrence, caught on camera in Australia last week. The animal spent the morning exploring the station and wandering close to the tracks before daily commuters arrived. Experts say koalas seen in unexpected locations such as this are the result of deforestation and urbanization, pushing them out of their habitats. This koala's adventure ended with a low-speed police chase, but the marsupial escaped, climbing the station fence and jumping back into the wilderness. Here's a look at some of the stories we're covering in our next hour. Regulating so-called ghost guns is now in the hands of the Supreme Court. Now how the justices may rule and the larger implications of the case. Plus, Floridians stock up and evacuate as Hurricane Milton races towards the state's Gulf Coast. We'll have a report from the ground as the storm approaches. And Palestinian militants and Hezbollah both launch rockets into Israel as the country expands its ground invasion of Lebanon. We have the latest from the Middle East. You're streaming the Daily Report.
These are the stories
1, 2, 3, go!
Of we, the people.
We're trying to generate our own hope.
It's a huge deal.
I'm enabling them to feel valued.
Eye on America. Weeknights on the CBS Evening News with Norah O'Donnell.
I had progressively fallen deeper into the world of online sports betting.
The risk is the rush.
What do you think is driving the spike in popularity?
I think it's legality.
If it's legal, I'm going to use it. There are ways to bet when you are 18.
We've created an epidemic of child gambling.
You can't walk into a male dormitory in a college campus without sports betting happening.
It's America's most neglected problem.
I used sports betting as a way to escape, when in reality, I'm choosing self-destruction. Whatever I had left, it was gone.
The purpose of the industry is to get you to play to extinction. And that means until all your money is gone.
Go to the ends of the earth. Reach for the stars.
Yeah, I just took off. That kind of thing.
Oh, that's pretty good.
Because there's always something new under the sun on CBS Sunday morning.
America Decides is your place for fact-based, unbiased reporting.
At the White House, at the Capitol, on the campaign trail.
What do you say to those in your party?
Any cracks in the Republican Party?
Our reporters and our anchors travel the country talking to voters like you
about the issues that matter most.
Immigration is really a factor right now
that are going to be driving your decisions.
What would you say to those who say, look, that's just democracy at work?
Listening to you and bringing your voice into our coverage.
I want a strong, proud America.
Is democracy on the ballot in 2024?
Let us help you decide.
America Decides. Stream our expanded one-hour program Monday through Thursday at 5 p.m. Eastern.
Exclusively on CBS News 24/7, the streaming home of CBS News.
People with developmental disabilities were once sequestered by the hundreds of thousands in institutions.
Many of our fellow citizens are suffering tremendously because lack of attention, lack of imagination, lack of adequate manpower.
Disability activists have since torn down barriers blocking them from living at home or in the community.
We conclude that Title II of the ADA requires states to provide community-based treatment for persons with mental disabilities.
But of the 16,000 people who remain in state-operated institutions, half are in 5 states, and Illinois is one of them.
I don't want to live in the institution. It makes me feel discriminated against.
Do you think there are people living in institutions in Illinois that don't need to be living there?
Yeah, because they're proving it as soon as they get out.
Eye on America, weeknights on the CBS Evening News.